Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the Forbidden City after the palace gates have long been barred, where the air tastes of cool stone and faint sandalwood smoke. Lanterns gutter low, throwing sleepy halos on crimson walls polished smooth by centuries of midnight breezes. You feel the hush of a place that only truly breathes when the day's pageantry is over. Honestly, you'd never survive a single shift as a Ming Palace night guard. The boredom alone would knock you out faster than the strongest sleeping draft. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slip past the shadow of the Meridian Gate, sandals whispering over ancient bricks that still hold the warmth of the day. Overhead, a sliver of moon drifts between heavy clouds, silvering the glazed roof tiles with a light so pale it feels borrowed from a dream. A night heron croaks somewhere near the moat, then falls silent as if remembering its manners. You pause beneath a carved archway, fingertips brushing the cold iron studs of the great red doors, and catch the faintest echo of distant chimes. Perhaps a courtier's forgotten bell. Perhaps just the wind teasing the copper. The courtyards stretch ahead like a sequence of secret breaths. You pass rows of bronze incense burners, where the last curls of smoke from evening prayers linger, smelling faintly of pine resin and old temple offerings. The air is cool enough to taste, a quiet blend of stone dust and lingering perfume from the Empress's gardens. Somewhere deeper inside, you hear the measured footfall of a night watchman, his cadence slow and deliberate, as if marking time itself. Beyond the gate of supreme harmony, the grand halls sleep beneath their golden roofs. By day they glitter like captured sunlight. By night they soften into velvet silhouettes. You move along a covered walkway, where carved dragons coil in the dim light, their lacquered scales slick with moonshine. Each step you take echoes softly, swallowed by the vastness of history. Farther on, a smaller door stands ajar, just wide enough to admit a single curious traveler. A draught carries a trace of jasmine and warm oil, signs of life beyond the public courts. You slip through and find yourself in the outer precinct of the Empress's private apartments. Here the stone paving is gentler, the lanterns burn lower, and the hush is intimate, like the pause between two verses of a lullaby. A pair of palace cats, their fur brushed to a silken sheen, lounge near a copper basin filled with lotus petals. One lifts its head to regard you with a stare as imperial as any emperor's, then closes its eyes again, unimpressed. From somewhere deeper within, you catch the almost imperceptible notes of a bamboo flute, an attendant signaling the start of the nightly preparations. You follow the sound and reach the moonlight corridor, a long gallery draped with gauze curtains that breathe in the midnight draught. The faint fragrance of agarwood thickens here, mixing with a whisper of sweet almond oil. This is the threshold to the Empress's world after dusk, where ceremony relaxes into ritual and power reshapes itself into quiet. A distant door slides open with the soft sigh of polished wood. You glimpse a flicker of warm candlelight and the silhouette of a handmaid carrying a shallow bronze brazier. Tiny sparks rise as she feeds it powdered incense. The scent unfurls, cedar, sandal, a thread of something floral you can't quite name. Scholars still debate whether the palace incense formula came from ancient Taoist recipes or Silk Road traders. But tonight it simply smells like history made gentle. Here, the empire's heartbeat slows. Every sound, your breath, the settling timbers, the occasional rustle of silk, feels magnified yet muffled, as though the palace itself is rocking you towards sleep. You realize this is only the beginning of the Empress's hidden nightly world, a place where discipline meets indulgence, where beauty is maintained with the same care as statecraft. And as you step farther into the glow, the walls seem to draw closer, inviting you to witness the secrets the daytime court will never see. You follow the faint trail of incense into a side courtyard, where the moonlight pools like liquid pearl on the polished flagstones. The night air tastes of old cedar and something faintly sweet like honey warmed in a copper pot. Ahead, a narrow doorway glows with the muted flicker of oil lamps. You ease closer, the soles of your shoes brushing over the faint grain of the stone, each step echoing like a polite knock. Inside, the Empress's attendants are beginning the evening rite of fragrance. 3 senior eunuchs stand at attention, their robes a quiet swirl of sable and blue. They bow in unison as 2 handmaids enter carrying trays of powdered woods, aloes, sandal, and a rare sliver of imported frankincense that the Portuguese once smuggled through South Seas ports. The debate among historians is whether those shipments came as tribute or trade, but tonight it hardly matters. The scent itself is tribute enough. You linger near a lacquered screen painted with cranes and pine. The eldest handmaid kneels, grinding the aromatic woods in a mortar of pale jade. The rhythmic thud of the pestle sets a sleepy cadence, like the heartbeat of the palace itself. You notice a subtle pattern of gold dust in the air, drifting in the lamplight, minute shavings of sandalwood catching the glow. The Empress enters without announcement, her presence obvious not by sound, but by a ripple of soft silk and the sudden stillness of the room. She wears a robe of deep plum lined with white fox fur, the hem stitched with clouds of silver thread that shimmer as she moves. You realize the weight of her attire would exhaust you within minutes. You'd never survive the layers of ceremonial Ming fashion. Instant sauna with a side of heavy shoulders. A young maid approaches with a copper bowl of water warmed over an ember brazier. Into it she drops petals of winter plum and a few strands of dried osmanthus. Steam rises, carrying a fragrance so delicate it feels like a memory of spring in the dead of winter. The Empress dips her hands, letting the perfumed warmth soak her skin, then gestures for her attendants to continue. Another maid scatters fine grains of ground amber across the floor around her seat, a tradition meant to calm the mind and invite gentle dreams. Some scholars insist this was mere superstition. Others point to early Chinese medicine and its belief in resin's power to steady the spirit. You decide both could be true. After all, a soothing aroma is its own argument. From beyond the chamber, a night wind slips through the carved lattice window, curling the incense smoke into shapes that could almost be dragons. The Empress watches them with a faint smile, as if reading an omen only she can see. A single cat pads across the threshold, tail high, before curling at her feet with the regal confidence of a creature that knows its own place in history. The youngest handmaid begins a low hum, an ancient lullaby from her home province of Fujian. Its tune is simple, swaying, almost nautical. The Empress closes her eyes, the corners of her lips softening. You catch the smallest tilt of her head in rhythm, a private concession to the melody. A candle sputters, throwing sparks of light across the jade floor. You smell the sudden rush of hot wax and cooling wick, and for a moment the room seems to shrink to that single point of glow and shadow. Outside, the heron calls again, echoing through the corridor like a careful gong. The fragrance of aloes wood deepens, mixing with the resinous amber and the gentle sweetness of plum. Your own breathing slows to match the unhurried pace of the chamber. This is no mere prelude to sleep. It is a nightly act of quiet command, a way for the Empress to remind the palace, and perhaps herself, that serenity can be orchestrated as surely as a court audience. When the final grains of incense are set alight, a hush falls so complete, you can hear the faint scratch of a brush from the scriptorium 2 halls away. The Empress opens her eyes, meeting yours for an impossible instant. There's a flicker of recognition, or maybe that's just the candle's trick. Either way, you stand rooted as the palace exhales around you, and the night drifts deeper into its own story. You trail the last curls of incense smoke, down a side passage where lanterns sway lazily. their silk shades painted with tiny cranes that seem to glide whenever a breeze sneaks through the lattice. The marble beneath your feet feels cooler here, polished smooth by centuries of quiet steps. You catch the faint drip of water from a hidden spout, a sound like a patient metronome guiding the palace towards sleep. Through a carved archway, you enter a smaller chamber lit by no more than 3 candles, their flames steady, as if trained for this duty. This is the Empress's private dressing room, less grand than the audience halls, but layered with a different sort of power. Gold-threaded cushions lie in careful order. Lacquered cabinets stand open, revealing ranks of combs carved from ivory and rosewood. Each drawer breathes a different fragrance: jasmine oil, ground pearl powder, a trace of camphor to ward off the damp. You think of your own cluttered dresser back home and almost laugh. This place makes a luxury store look like a garage sale. A pair of senior maids kneel before the Empress, who now sits on a low stool padded with imperial yellow silk. One maid removes the phoenix crown, an elaborate headdress heavy with kingfisher feathers and dangling pearls. The soft chime of each pearl strand colliding is like a miniature wind bell. The other maid eases jade hairpins free one by one, placing them on a silk tray where they gleam like captured moonlight. The Empress tilts her head slightly forward, allowing them to uncoil the layers of her hair. A waterfall of black silk spills over her shoulders, so glossy it reflects the candle flames in shifting ribbons. You find yourself mesmerized by the slow rhythm of the attendants' hands. Lift, unwind, smooth, repeat. Historians still debate whether these intricate hairstyles took hours each morning, or if the palace simply measured time differently. Tonight, the question is irrelevant. You are watching a living clock made of patience and hair. From a nearby alcove, another maid brings a small bronze mirror. Its back is engraved with twin dragons chasing a flaming pearl, their scales catching the firelight. She sets it before the Empress, angling it so the Queen can watch the final pin slip free. The mirror throws a soft halo across her face, and for a moment you glimpse not an untouchable monarch, but a woman savoring the rare luxury of being gently undone. A faint rustle draws your eye to a side shelf where a silk pouch rests. One maid opens it to reveal a powder as pale as first snow, ground freshwater pearls mixed with a hint of crushed magnolia blossom. She dabs it along the Empress's temples, explaining in a whisper that it cools the spirit and brightens the skin. Some scholars argue this was mere superstition. Others insist the minerals truly soothed the nerves. You breathe in the subtle floral note and silently vote for both. The Empress stretches her arms with a sigh soft enough to be mistaken for a breeze. A tiny joke flickers across your mind. If stretching were an imperial edict, the entire empire would be calmer. You nearly chuckle aloud but catch yourself, the sound swallowed by the hush of the chamber. The senior maid next presents a shallow dish of warm water, infused with chrysanthemum petals and a few drops of rice wine. The Empress dips a silk cloth into the fragrant bath and presses it gently to her face. Steam rises, carrying the scent of sweet grain and autumn flowers. You feel your own eyelids grow heavy as if the steam crosses the room to wrap around you. Outside the window, a nightbird calls, short, sharp, like a question. Somewhere deeper in the palace, a distant drum answers, marking the hour. The Empress lowers the cloth, her skin glowing faintly in the candlelight, and for a heartbeat the entire Forbidden City seems to pause, waiting for her next breath. One maid begins combing through the long black strands, each stroke deliberate, the teeth of the comb clicking softly like distant raindrops. Another gathers the loosened ornaments onto a jade plate, arranging them in the same order they will appear again at dawn. Nothing is hurried. Even time itself feels content to linger here, unspooling with the steady grace of hair through a comb. You realize that this simple act, removing ornaments, easing tension from scalp and shoulders, is as important as any court decree. It is a nightly declaration that beneath the layers of silk and ceremony, lives a person who needs rest, who claims a quiet empire of her own. And as the last strand of hair falls perfectly smooth, the chamber exhales a subtle warmth, as though acknowledging that the day's wait has finally, blessedly, been set aside. You linger near the doorway, as the gentle scraping of comb through hair fades into a softer rhythm, the sound of water being poured into a cedar tub. The room beyond is warmer, a private bath chamber lined with pale stone and veined marble that reflects the candlelight in slow ripples. Steam curls upward, catching the glow so that the air itself seems gilded. You step forward, and the faint aroma of camellia blossoms greets you, sweet but restrained, like a polite invitation. A senior attendant lifts the lid of a bronze kettle and pours a ribbon of water into the waiting tub. Beneath the rising mist, petals of white lotus and slivers of dried orange peel float like small boats. A servant sprinkles powdered ginger into the mix, releasing a sudden sharpness that tingles your nose. Historians still debate whether this combination was for skin care, for circulation, or simply for the luxury of fragrance, but the result is indisputably calming. You feel your shoulders loosen just breathing it in. The Empress steps forward, a subtle rustle of silk marking her movement. She wears a robe of soft teal lined with mink, tied loosely at the waist, and simple embroidered slippers that whisper across the floor. One handmaid kneels to untie the sash, the other steadies a lacquered screen to shield the view. You glimpse only the trailing edge of fabric as it slides free, a small cascade of color that disappears into the waiting hands of the attendants. She lowers herself into the cedar tub with the unhurried grace of someone who has rehearsed this ritual 1,000 times. Water laps gently against the polished sides, sending tiny reflections dancing across the marble walls. A faint sigh escapes her lips, more of a release than a sound, and even the attendants seem to breathe easier. You catch yourself exhaling in time, as if the palace has synchronized everyone's lungs. Another maid brings a small cloth bundle of herbs, chrysanthemum buds, dried plum blossom, and a sprig of rare Lingnan mint. She crumbles them between her fingers, so their oils bleed into the water, releasing a fragrance that slides along the steam like a lullaby. The scent makes you think of spring markets and early morning gardens, even as the night outside thickens to velvet. The Empress closes her eyes, letting the water soak her hair. A maid pours a thin stream of warm tea over her shoulders. Yes, actual tea, a pale infusion of green leaves and honey. "To brighten the skin," she whispers, though it's unclear if she means the Empress's or your own, since the steam has already kissed your face pink. Scholars would note the antioxidants. Poets would call it moonlight in liquid form. In the corner, a bronze brazier hisses softly as another log of sandalwood catches flame. The smoke twines upward, delicate as calligraphy, and for a moment you think you can read words in it. Characters of peace, maybe, or just the universal script for relax. You nearly laugh at yourself, then remember that even the most skeptical ministers once consulted omens before a long journey. A gentle splash breaks the quiet. The Empress leans back, her hair drifting like a dark river around her. One attendant uses a carved ivory ladle to pour water over her arms in measured arcs, each motion as deliberate as a brushstroke. The candlelight slides across the surface, gilding every droplet until it looks like she's bathing in molten bronze. You feel the air grow heavier with warmth, and something more difficult to name. A serenity that seeps through stone and skin alike. Outside, a night breeze rattles the lattice windows, carrying with it the faint cries of distant vendors closing their stalls beyond the forbidden city walls. The contrast makes you smile. Somewhere out there, coins clink and deals are struck, while here time folds in on itself, measured only by the soft percussion of water and the slow rise of steam. The youngest attendant begins to hum a folk tune from her home province, a melody of rolling hills and quiet rivers. The notes thread through the room, mingling with the hiss of the brazier. The Empress opens her eyes just enough to share a private smile with the girl, a flicker of warmth that softens the gold edges of imperial distance. When the bathing is complete, a final rinse of cool jasmine water signals the end. The Empress stands, attendants draping her instantly in layers of warmed silk towels, each one embroidered with cloud patterns said to guard against nightmares. As she steps onto the waiting mat, droplets slide from her hair to the marble floor, catching the candlelight like tiny stars before disappearing into the stone. You realize that what you've witnessed is more than a cleansing. It's a ceremony of return, a slow shedding of the day's burdens, a quiet claiming of self beneath the layers of empire. And as the attendants guide her toward the next chamber, the lingering heat of the cedar bath wraps around you too, a gentle invitation to follow deeper into the secret heart of the night. The bathing chamber exhales a warm mist behind you as you follow the faint rustle of silk into the next room. Here the air feels cooler, scented with freshly laundered linen and the faint spice of clove oil. The chamber is smaller, its walls lacquered a deep vermilion that catches the lantern light like polished wine. A single bronze mirror stands on a carved stand, its surface reflecting the wavering glow of candles that line the sill. The Empress moves toward a low couch draped in snow-white silk. Attendants glide like shadows around her, each one carrying a precise piece of the nightly routine. One bears a tray of tiny porcelain pots sealed with beeswax. Another holds a folded length of pale cloth that looks as soft as breath. You watch as they lay each item out in a pattern so symmetrical it could double as a geometry lesson. First comes the hair drying. Two maids kneel, each with a fan of painted bamboo. They move in perfect unison, waving slow arcs of warm air through the Empress's long black hair. The fragrance of lotus water and cedar bath lingers, rising each time the fans stir the air. A faint crackle from the brazier punctuates their rhythm. You find yourself breathing with their strokes. Inhale on the upward sweep, exhale on the down, until your chest feels as calm as theirs. Next, a third attendant approaches with a small jade jar of pearl cream. She dips a slender brush inside and begins to trace cool circles along the Empress's forehead and cheeks. Historians still debate whether the formula truly contained powdered pearls or if the glow came simply from careful massage. Either way, the soft gleam on the Empress's skin catches the candlelight like moonrise over a quiet lake. Another maid unrolls a strip of fine silk infused with ginseng and camellia. She presses it gently along the Empress's arms and neck, murmuring a chant barely louder than the flicker of the flames. The fabric leaves behind a faint sheen, a whisper of scent that suggests distant mountain gardens after rain. The Empress opens her eyes briefly, meeting the gaze of her oldest attendant, a woman whose hair is more silver than black. No words pass, but a shared understanding settles in the room, the kind that needs no empire to validate it. You catch the hint of a smile at the corner of the Empress's lips, a softness rare in daylight court. From a side table, another maid retrieves a delicate wooden comb carved with phoenix feathers. She works it through the damp strands, slow and deliberate, the teeth clicking like distant rain. With each pass, the Empress's hair shines darker, deeper, until it seems to drink the light itself. You wonder if the combing is for beauty or for meditation. Perhaps both. A sudden draft slips through the lattice window, carrying the distant toll of a bronze bell. The hour changes. The palace marks time while the Empress rewrites it. Second by second, stroke by stroke. You think of your own rushed evenings, emails, alarms, a last-minute scroll through glowing screens, and almost laugh at how thin they feel beside this careful choreography. The final touch is a dab of aromatic balm at each wrist, a blend of plum blossom and a trace of musk brought from the southern ports. Its scent is light yet lingering, like a memory you can't quite name. Some scholars insist this particular recipe doubled as a natural insect repellent. Others say it was simply for pleasure. The Empress inhales once, eyes half closed, and lets the fragrance settle. Outside, a breeze teases the bamboo, making a soft rattle that sounds suspiciously like applause. Perhaps even the garden approves. A cat stretches along the doorway, tail twitching, then curls again, content to guard the silence. When the last pot is closed and the final fan folded, the attendants bow in quiet unison. The Empress rises, her robe now a cascade of silver-white silk that glimmers as though woven from moonlight itself. Every detail, every breath of perfume, every slow stroke of the comb, has transformed the day's monarch into a figure of serene night. As she moves toward the inner sleeping chamber, you sense that these nightly rites are not merely about appearance. They are a reclamation of self, a patient reminder that beneath the weight of court intrigue and imperial duty, there is still a human heart seeking calm. And as you follow her into the next corridor, the mingled scents of pearl cream and plum blossom trail behind like the gentlest invitation to dream. The Empress glides toward her private supper chamber, the silk of her moon-white robe whispering against the lacquered floor. You step behind the last attendant and immediately notice the change in air. Warm from banked charcoal, fragrant with rice steam, and the faint sweetness of longan fruit. It is late, yet the palace kitchen has not slept. Its quiet industry drifts here like a lullaby of clinking porcelain and simmering broth. A low table waits in the center, set with dishes so modest you might mistake them for a scholar's midnight snack. A single porcelain bowl of lotus seed congee sends up a curl of steam, delicate as mist. Beside it rests a bamboo plate of jujube buns and a small dish of candied kumquat. The austerity surprises you. No feast of peacock tongues or shark fin, just food designed to coax gentle dreams. Historians argue whether this restraint reflected Taoist health wisdom or simply a body weary of endless banquets. Either way, the effect is soothing. An elderly eunuch enters carrying a teapot carved from pale jade, the spout shaped like a crane's beak. He pours a thin stream of chrysanthemum tea into a cup so fine you can see the candlelight through its walls. The aroma is grassy, honey-soft, with a trace of autumn wind. You breathe it in and feel your own pulse slow. The Empress sits on a cushion of indigo silk and gestures for the attendants to kneel. No words, only the quiet choreography of service. One maid places the congee before her, another offers a spoon of carved sandalwood. She lifts it with an elegance that makes even this simple meal feel ceremonial. The first sip releases a faint sigh of steam. The sound alone could lull an empire. A young handmaid brings a plate of lotus petals, lightly fried in rice oil. Their edges shimmer like tiny pieces of sunrise. "For a calm spirit," she whispers, barely loud enough for the room. Some scholars claim these midnight snacks were chosen to balance the yin and yang of palace life. Others suspect the Empress simply liked the taste. You suspect both, because the aroma is enough to make your stomach rumble like a distant drum. From somewhere beyond the lattice screens comes the muted splash of water in a garden pond. A night breeze slips through, carrying the scent of wet bamboo and the faint metallic tang of the moat. The mingling smells, sweet congee, cool stone, autumn leaves, wrap around you like a silk quilt. The Empress takes a slow bite of jujube bun, its red-brown filling glowing in the lantern light. She closes her eyes for a moment, as if savoring not just the flavor but the rare privacy. In daylight she is an emblem, a figurehead of dynasty and decree. Here she is simply a woman tasting warm fruit on a cool night. A maid refills the chrysanthemum tea, and the soft gurgle of water against porcelain fills the pause. One of the younger eunuchs hums a tune, low, almost absent-minded, an old river song from the south. The melody twines with the rustle of bamboo until the whole room feels like a floating pavilion adrift on moonlight. You glance at the jade teapot again and notice a hairline crack running along its base. The floor catches the lantern glow like a faint star. You imagine some future historian debating whether it symbolizes fragility or simple age. Tonight, it is just another quiet reminder that perfection is overrated. The Empress finishes her congee, setting the bowl aside with a gesture of contented finality. A maid wipes the table with a cloth scented faintly of sandalwood, leaving the surface gleaming. Another offers a tiny cup of pear nectar to rinse the palate. The sweetness is subtle, more suggestion than taste, like the last note of a lullaby. Outside, a bell tolls the next watch. The attendants bow and begin to clear the dishes, their movements slow and deliberate so as not to break the chamber's gentle rhythm. You realize you have matched their pace without noticing, breathing slower. Thoughts softened, eyelids heavier. As the Empress rises, the indigo cushion retains the faint outline of her form, a temporary echo of stillness. She moves toward the inner corridor, trailing the fragrance of pear nectar and chrysanthemum. The supper chamber falls silent behind her, yet the calm lingers like a second moonlight, guiding you deeper into the night's unfolding secrets. You follow the soft swish of silk into a gallery, where lanterns glow like captured moons behind carved wooden screens. The air cools again, touched by a faint draft that smells of ink and old paper. Here the Empress trades warmth for quiet thought. A long table stretches beneath the windows, its surface a study in order, stacked scrolls, a jade brush rest shaped like a leaping carp, a slab of smooth black inkstone still glistening from its last use. The attendants arrange themselves with the silence of falling petals. One kneels to lay out fresh paper, rice white and fine enough that candlelight passes through like thin mist. Another grinds a stick of ink in a shallow dish, the slow circular motion releasing a scent both earthy and slightly sweet. You breathe it in and feel as though you've just stepped into a mountain hermitage rather than the center of an empire. The Empress takes her seat on a low stool, robes settling around her like a tide of silver. She accepts the brush with a small nod. Its handle is polished bamboo, worn smooth by years of midnight writing. She dips it into the ink, lifts it and pauses, the bristles suspended as if listening for a signal from some unseen constellation. When the first stroke touches the paper, the room itself seems to lean in. She writes slowly, each character a careful melody of arcs and points. You recognize the graceful rhythm of classical poetry, though the meaning escapes you. Some historians still debate whether these night writings were private meditations or coded instructions for the court. Tonight the words are simply beautiful, ink blooming like dark flowers on a pale field. Outside, a single cricket joins the performance, its chirp slipping neatly between the brush strokes. The sound might be a metronome or a mischievous percussionist. It's impossible to tell. You smile at the thought of a tiny musician keeping pace with imperial calligraphy. A maid approaches with a small porcelain dish of tea, the steam scented with dried tangerine peel. The Empress sips without breaking her rhythm, her left hand steadying the page as the brush continues its quiet dance. Each exhale leaves a faint ghost of citrus and warmth in the cool air. You shift your weight on the polished floor, careful not to break the spell. The faintest creak escapes anyway, but the Empress does not look up. Her focus is absolute, the kind of concentration that turns minutes into hours without a ripple. You think of your own distracted evenings, notifications, half-read messages, and feel a sudden, almost comical envy. At the far end of the table lies a sealed scroll tied with indigo silk. A senior attendant unties it and gently rolls it open to reveal a painting of plum blossoms dusted with snow. The Empress studies it for a moment, then dips her brush in crimson ink and adds a single petal, a small act of collaboration across time. The red stands out like a heartbeat against the black and white, a quiet rebellion that no historian will ever footnote. Another maid enters with a slender bronze censer, adding a pinch of sandalwood ash to keep the air dry for the paper. Smoke spirals upward, twisting like a dragon seeking the moon. For a fleeting second, the shapes align into something almost legible. A character for peace, perhaps, or simply the night having its own opinion. The Empress finally lays down the brush and examines her work with the faintest smile. She sets the sheet aside to dry, the ink glistening as if it still holds a piece of her breath. A soft clap signals the attendants to tidy the space. Scrolls re-rolled, inkstone wiped, brush rinsed and wrapped in silk. As she rises, the moonlight slips through the lattice windows, casting the shadows of pine branches across the paper. Like an unplanned illustration, you imagine future scholars debating the meaning of those stray lines, never knowing it was merely the moon collaborating in secret. The Empress steps away, her presence leaving the gallery warmer than before. You linger a moment longer, letting the scent of ink and sandalwood settle around you, until even your thoughts seem written in a calmer script. Then you follow her into the next corridor, where the hush of the palace deepens, and the night's quiet story continues to unfold. The corridor narrows, guiding you into a chamber where sound itself seems to slow. Here the lanterns burn low, their faint halos quivering across carved beams painted with faded constellations. Fair breeze carries the distant notes of a bamboo flute, soft, deliberate, like water threading through stone. You step inside and the music grows clearer, wrapping the room in an invisible hush. The Empress sits cross-legged on a round cushion of pale green silk. Before her rests a guqin, its lacquered surface dark as midnight tea. 7 strings stretch across polished wood, each one catching the candlelight like a silver thread. A senior attendant kneels nearby, tuning with deft fingers that barely disturb the stillness. You notice the faint aroma of cypress drifting from the instrument, as if the tree itself remembers its roots. She begins to play. The first notes glide out so quietly, you wonder if you imagined them, a low hum that settles into the floor and your chest at once. The melody unfolds with unhurried grace, plucked harmonics like raindrops, sliding tones that echo distant thunder. Historians still debate whether these nocturnes were meditations or coded messages for the inner court. Tonight, they are simply the sound of time deciding not to rush. The attendants arrange themselves around her in a loose circle, each leaning forward slightly, heads bowed, as if the music has drawn them into orbit. A young maid closes her eyes, her breath aligning with the guqin's slow pulse. Another begins to hum a soft counter-melody, barely above a whisper, a thread of harmony that blends with the plucked strings, until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. You catch the faint shimmer of her sleeve as she shifts position, the embroidered cranes seeming to take flight with every subtle movement. A candle gutters, sending a lick of warm wax down its side. The scent mingles with cypress and old wood, a perfume that feels older than the palace itself. The Empress tilts her head, listening to her own echoes, then lets a pause hang so long it becomes part of the song. Outside, a nightbird calls, a single clear note that lands perfectly in the silence. Someone in the circle smiles, but no one speaks. She resumes with a brighter phrase, the notes curling like morning light over distant hills. You imagine rivers swelling, peach blossoms falling, even the restless city beyond the palace walls leaning closer to hear. The guqin vibrates under her fingertips, and you realize the sound is as much touch as tone, a conversation between wood, string, and pulse. A senior attendant pours warm tea into a jade cup, its steam twisting upward to meet the melody. The faint citrus of dried tangerine peel drifts across the room, mingling with the music, until it feels as though the fragrance itself is singing. You breathe it in and feel the edges of thought soften. For a moment you picture the records scholars will someday pore over, lists of instruments played, court musicians hired, imperial schedules dictated. None of those ledgers will capture this. The way the music hangs like a lantern in the dark. The way each note lands on the heart before it reaches the ear. The final chord fades, lingering in the rafters long after her fingers still. Silence deepens, rich and velvety. The Empress lowers her hands and the attendants bow as one, a slow ripple of respect. She offers a faint smile, the kind that is both invitation and farewell. Outside the chamber, a soft wind stirs the bamboo, echoing the melody's last sigh. You remain a moment longer, letting the hush settle into your bones until even the memory of sound feels like a gentle weight. Then, as the Empress rises and the circle disperses, you follow once more into the deepening night of the Forbidden City, where every shadow seems tuned to her unspoken song. You step back into the corridor, the final notes of the guqin still vibrating somewhere behind your ribs. Ahead lies a passage hung with silk curtains, painted in muted shades of moonlight and pine. The air cools as you move forward, carrying a faint sweetness of sandalwood and the sharper edge of winter jasmine. A single attendant beckons with a candle, her footsteps silent on the polished stone. The chamber you enter feels more like a private planet than a room. Lanterns burn low behind latticed screens, scattering patterns of stars across the floor. In the center rests a low table set with objects so small and deliberate they might escape notice. A bronze incense burner shaped like a mountain peak, a porcelain bowl of water still rippling from some recent touch, a set of carved ivory dice. This is the Empress's chamber of quiet games, a place to unspool the mind before sleep. She enters soon after, her silver-white robe trailing a whisper of moonlight. Two senior attendants bow in place before her, a lacquered box filled with narrow bamboo slips, each etched with ancient poetry and riddles. You imagine scholars arguing over whether these games were intellectual training or simple diversion. Tonight they are a lullaby made of words. The Empress draws one slip, tilts her head and begins to read aloud. Her voice is soft but steady, carrying the rhythm of a distant river. The characters describe a plum tree blooming in winter, a promise of endurance against cold winds. An attendant answers with a riddle of her own. What walks without feet and hums without breath? A tiny smile flickers across the Empress's face before she replies, "The wind through pine." A gentle murmur of approval passes around the room, more felt than heard. Another maid brings a small tray of candied lotus seeds and warm almond milk. The scent drifts toward you, nutty, faintly floral, and you find your own stomach responding, a quiet echo of the night's contentment. The Empress invites her companions to a round of ivory dice. They roll with a soft clatter, the numbers deciding who must recite the next line of poetry. When a young maid stumbles, the Empress laughs softly, a sound like the brush of silk against wood. It's the first true laugh you've heard all evening, and it lands with the easy warmth of a friend teasing, not a ruler commanding. Outside the screens, a breeze stirs the bamboo. The sound mingles with the laughter until you can't tell which is which. One attendant pours tea scented with dried chrysanthemum, the steam rising like a second voice. The Empress lifts her cup, inhales, and sets it down without drinking, simply letting the fragrance settle over the gathering like a gentle curtain. A cat appears, perhaps the same imperial guardian from earlier, slipping between the curtains with unhurried grace. It circles the Empress once, tail flicking, before curling near the incense burner. The faint crackle of its purr joins the quiet symphony of dice, poetry, and night air. Another riddle follows, this one about the moon hiding behind clouds. The Empress answers with a single character drawn in the air by her fingertip, its meaning lost to you, but met with soft applause. Historians might debate these sessions endlessly, searching for political codes or secret decrees. But standing here, you sense something far simpler. The sheer relief of an Empress allowed for a brief hour to play. The final candle gutters, and the room deepens into a velvet twilight. One by one, the attendants bow and collect the dice, the poetry slips, the empty cups. The Empress watches them with a calm that seems to stretch beyond sleep, as if savoring the last moments before dreams claim her. When she rises, the star-shaped lantern patterns shift across the floor, scattering like startled fireflies. You follow at a respectful distance, the scent of almond milk and jasmine trailing in her wake. The games are over, but their gentle echo lingers, a reminder that even within the strict geometry of the Forbidden City, there is space for small joys, and for the quiet victory of a night well spent. The hush deepens as you trail the Empress through another corridor, lined with dark cedar panels. The scent of freshly polished wood mixes with a cool trace of winter air seeping through the high lattice windows. Beyond the last screen, a softer glow beckons, amber and honeyed like the promise of sleep itself. You enter her private sleeping chamber. The first thing you notice is the silence. No rustle of attendants, no drip of water, only the low hum of a single brazier and the faint sigh of the wind. A canopy bed dominates the center, its carved frame a masterpiece of dragons and clouds. Curtains of pale silk cascade from the ceiling, each embroidered with cranes so delicate they seem poised to take flight. A round moon window frames the night sky, where a slice of silver moon hovers just above the tiled roofs of the Forbidden City. The Empress pauses at the threshold, allowing the quiet to settle like a soft cloak. Her attendants slip in behind her, carrying the final touches of the evening ritual. One kneels to spread an extra layer of quilted silk across the bed, the fabric dyed a calm shade of lotus blue. Another sets a small porcelain bowl of glowing embers near the footboard, its faint heat designed to keep the winter chill at bay. A young maid steps forward with a sachet of dried lavender and chrysanthemum. She tucks it beneath the pillow, explaining in a whisper that its scent keeps dreams light and spirits calm. Scholars might argue whether this is herbal science or palace superstition, but the fragrance that drifts toward you is undeniably soothing, like a meadow hidden under snow. The Empress moves to the dressing table, where a single candle flickers beside a bronze mirror. She loosens the last tie of her robe, letting the fabric slide across her shoulders in a soft hiss. Another attendant approaches with a robe of undyed silk, light as mist, and slips it gently over her. The exchange is wordless, a choreography of trust and care. From a side alcove, a senior attendant brings a bowl of warm water infused with slices of pear and a few drops of honey. The Empress rinses her hands slowly, fingers trailing through the fragrant liquid, as if savoring the memory of the day. Tiny ripples catch the candlelight, casting golden rings across the dark lacquered surface of the table. Outside, the night settles deeper. A temple bell tolls in the distance, one clear note that seems to hang between heaven and earth. A breeze stirs the curtains, making the embroidered cranes sway in quiet flight. You can almost believe they are alive, keeping watch as she prepares for sleep. The Empress crosses to the bed. Two attendants draw back the curtains, revealing linen so smooth they might have been woven from moonlight. She steps onto the low platform and sits, her posture still regal even in the intimacy of night. One maid gently combs the last tangles from her hair, the ivory teeth gliding with a sound like distant rain. Another brings a cup of warm almond milk, mixed with a hint of ginseng. She sips, eyes half closed, a small sigh escaping like a final punctuation mark on the day. Before extinguishing the candle, the senior attendant recites a brief blessing, a single line of ancient poetry promising longevity and calm dreams. The Empress repeats the words softly, her voice barely above the crackle of the brazier. Historians may debate the origin of this verse, but in the hush of the chamber it feels timeless, as if the walls themselves remember. The attendants bow low, backing away until only the senior remains. She lowers the silk curtains with the care of someone sealing a precious letter, then quietly withdraws. The candlelight dims to a soft glow, painting the room in shades of amber and pearl. Now the Empress lies back, the lavender sachet beneath her head, the hush of the Forbidden City folding around her like a second quilt. Outside, the moon drifts behind a thin cloud, and the last sound you hear is the faint rustle of her breath blending with the wind, a rhythm older than empire, steady enough to carry you toward sleep as well. The palace sleeps, yet the night carries a heartbeat all its own. You linger in the corridor just beyond the silk curtains, where the quiet is a tapestry woven from soft brazier crackles and the distant sigh of bamboo. The Empress's breathing has already merged with the deeper rhythms of the Forbidden City, but the attendants remain awake, each performing subtle tasks that keep the imperial night intact. A senior attendant moves first, lighting a fresh stick of sandalwood in a narrow bronze holder. The smoke curls upward in slow spirals, a delicate guard against wandering spirits and creeping chill. She bows toward the moon window before retreating, leaving a trail of incense that feels like a benediction in the air. Historians still debate whether this ritual was meant for protection or simple fragrance, but the serenity it casts is unmistakable. Farther down the hall, two eunuchs pace with measured steps, their soft shoes barely whispering against the stone. Each carries a lantern painted with cloud motifs, its glow throwing fleeting shapes across the carved beams. They pause at intervals to listen, first for danger, then for the quiet itself, as if to confirm the palace's pulse remains steady. Outside the high windows, a gust of wind shakes loose a cascade of pine needles. They drift across the moonlight like dark confetti, their faint rustle blending with the call of a solitary nightbird. You draw your cloak tighter, the chill sliding across your skin like a silk ribbon dipped in ice. Yet the stillness soothes you more than any warmth. One young maid slips from the chamber carrying a lacquered tray. On it rests a small porcelain cup half filled with water. She stops beneath a hanging lantern and sets the cup on a carved shelf, murmuring a brief prayer to the kitchen god. The candlelight catches the water's surface, making it shimmer like liquid gold. Scholars might claim this is a symbolic offering to ensure sweet dreams. Tonight it simply feels like an act of quiet gratitude. The palace cat returns, padding along the corridor with regal unconcern. Its eyes flash like twin coins as it pauses beside you, tail flicking. For a heartbeat it meets your gaze, and you sense it knows more of these midnight customs than any historian ever will. Then it moves on, a silent shadow weaving between screens and pillars. From somewhere beyond the outer courtyard comes the muted clang of a watchman's gong. The sound rolls through the halls like distant thunder, marking the deep night hour when the city outside drifts into its most vulnerable sleep. Inside, however, every motion remains deliberate. A maid smoothing a crease in the Empress's coverlet, a eunuch adjusting the lantern wick to keep the flame low and steady. A final inspection of the door's bronze latch. You glance back toward the bedchamber. Through a narrow opening in the curtains, you glimpse the faint outline of the Empress beneath her silk quilt. Her breathing is slow and even, the lavender sachet surely working its subtle magic. The candlelight paints her face in shades of pearl and amber, softening the lines of authority until she appears almost weightless. The senior attendant kneels once more, pressing her forehead briefly to the cool stone floor. It is a gesture of both service and farewell, a silent promise to guard the night until dawn. She rises without sound and motions to the others. One by one they retreat, their silhouettes slipping away like falling petals. Now the chamber belongs to moonlight and memory. The embroidered cranes on the bed curtains sway faintly as a final breeze passes through, their wings catching the last glimmer of the dying lantern. You listen as the sounds of the palace fade to the slow rhythm of the Empress's breath. Each inhale a quiet victory over the day, each exhale a soft surrender to dreams. You stand for a moment longer, letting the cool air and sandalwood smoke settle around you. Beyond these walls, empires will rise and fall, scholars will argue over meanings, and the world will forget 1,000 small rituals. But here tonight, the secret night routine of a Ming empress lives on in the simplest details. A cup of water, a cat's silent patrol, and the steady whisper of sleep that outlasts history itself. The hush of the palace grows so deep it feels like a second skin. You linger in the corridor, reluctant to disturb the serene rhythm, when a faint flicker of movement draws your eye toward a side passage. A single lantern sways there, its dim flame tracing a path toward the imperial garden. Curiosity tugs at you like a soft thread, and you follow. The garden greets you with the chill of late night, a mingling of damp earth, pine resin, and the sweet ghost of winter jasmine. Moonlight pours across the stone paths in long silver ribbons, picking out the edges of carved railings and frozen lotus ponds. A light mist clings to the low shrubs, blurring their outlines until they seem like brushstrokes on a half-finished painting. Near the koi pond, a figure kneels. It is the senior attendant, the same one who oversaw the Empress's final preparations. She holds a small bronze bowl of water and a bundle of narrow bamboo sticks. Without noticing you, she dips a finger into the bowl and scatters a few droplets onto the stones. Each drop catches the moonlight like a tiny star before vanishing. She begins to hum a quiet melody, soft, lilting, older than the palace itself. You recognize fragments of a folk tune you once heard in a village far from Beijing, a song of safe journeys and peaceful dreams. Scholars might debate whether this is a prayer to the night spirits or simply a habit from childhood. Either way, it folds the garden in gentle calm. A pair of white cranes, startled by nothing visible, glide across the pond's reflection, their wings whispering against the night. They land on the far bank, standing like pale statues under the crooked pines. The attendant bows toward them, her movement as fluid as water. Perhaps she offers them a silent greeting, or perhaps the cranes are considered messengers, carrying blessings to the sleeping Empress. You move closer, your footsteps muffled by moss. The air smells faintly of wet stone and plum blossom. The attendant sprinkles the last of the water and sets the bronze bowl beside a lantern. Then she draws one bamboo stick from the bundle, examines the carved characters along its length, and tucks it back with a small nod. A private augury, maybe, a way of reading the night for omens of the coming dawn. Somewhere beyond the walls, the city exhales, a low thrum of distant drums marking the change of the watch. The sound drifts through the trees and mingles with the garden's quiet heartbeat. You feel it in your own chest, slow and steady, a reminder that time continues even when the world seems paused. The attendant finally rises, her silhouette etched in silver light. She pauses to gaze at the moon, now a thin coin sinking toward the horizon. Her breath plumes in the cold air, a brief cloud that dissolves as quickly as the water she offered. Without a word, she turns back toward the palace, her shadow gliding over the frost-tipped grass. You remain by the pond, letting the mist bead on your sleeves. The koi beneath the ice shift lazily, flashes of gold and white glimmering like fallen stars. The garden smells richer now, pine, water, a trace of the incense smoke drifting from the Empress's chamber. You sense the weight of centuries pressing lightly here, not heavy but patient, as if the stones themselves remember every quiet midnight watch. Above, the cranes lift again, their wings slicing the air with a soft rush that sounds almost like a sigh. They vanish into the moonlight, leaving only a ripple across the pond's mirrored surface. For a long breath, nothing moves. The palace, the garden, the very air itself seem to wait, content in their secret rituals. When you finally turn to leave, the path glows faintly under the waning moon. Each step back toward the sleeping Empress feels slower, quieter, as if the garden is teaching you its own lesson in stillness. By the time you reach the corridor once more, the night has deepened into something beyond silence, a vast, gentle pause holding the promise of dawn. The corridor welcomes you back with a hush so profound it almost hums. The faint glow of lanterns leads you toward a small pavilion that overlooks the inner courtyard. As you approach, the sound of slow, deliberate breathing reaches your ears, not the Empress, but the guards stationed beyond the great gates, their presence a living extension of the night's calm. You pause at the threshold of the pavilion. Here the world is distilled to shadow and moonlight, The roof tiles catch a sliver of silver, and the carved balustrades throw lattice patterns across the polished floor. Their brazier burns low at the center, releasing a thin ribbon of cedar smoke that drifts upward like a lazy comet. A pair of young eunuchs sit cross-legged by the brazier, their eyes half closed, faces softened by the glow. They're on the midnight watch, yet their posture suggests a kind of waking meditation. One slowly turns a set of carved wooden beads through his fingers, each click a heartbeat in the silence. The other holds a folded fan across his lap, tracing invisible characters on the wood with a fingertip, as though rehearsing poems only the night can hear. Behind them, the great courtyard stretches into shadow. You catch the faintest stir of movement as a patrol guard passes, the edge of his halberd gleaming for a breath before darkness swallows it again. Somewhere deeper in the complex, a gong sounds the hour. The mellow note glides across the rooftops, its echo soft as a cat's paw. The eunuch with the beads glances toward the sound and whispers a single line of verse. The moon keeps no ledger, yet it counts us all. His companion smiles faintly, adding, "And dreams know the secret paths we guard." Their voices fade back into the hush, leaving only the slow exhale of the brazier. Historians still debate whether these night vigils carried hidden rituals or were simply acts of quiet discipline. Standing here, you sense both. A small wooden door creaks open at the far end of the pavilion, revealing another attendant carrying a tray of warm barley tea. Steam curls into the night air, scented with a hint of ginger. She sets the tray beside the brazier and bows, her silhouette outlined in the lantern glow. Without a word, each eunuch accepts a cup, cradling it in both hands as if to trap the fleeting warmth. You join them in silence, watching the way the tea's surface trembles with each faint vibration of the palace. Distant footsteps, a shifting beam, perhaps the Empress herself turning in her sleep. The taste, when you imagine it, is earthy and lightly sweet, the kind of flavor that lingers without demanding attention. Beyond the courtyard, a stray gust stirs the pines, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and old stone. For an instant, the smoke from the brazier and the breath of the trees intertwine, weaving a fragrance both wild and composed. You breathe it in, feeling the night settle deeper into your chest. The eunuch with the fan finally speaks again, his tone half-teasing. "They say the stars above the palace listen better than the ministers by day." The other chuckles, a sound like dry leaves brushed by wind. There's a small rebellion, a gentle acknowledgement that the vastness of the sky outlasts every edict and title. Minutes, or perhaps hours, drift past in quiet companionship. The moon slides lower, gilding the courtyard stones with a pale light that seems to shimmer from within. A final log collapses in the brazier, sending up a burst of sparks that fade before they can rise higher than the eaves. When the tea is finished, the attendants collect the cups and bow once more. The eunuchs resume their meditative posture, eyes half-lidded, as if becoming part of the architecture itself. You stand, reluctant to break the spell, but the cool pull of the palace beckons you onward. As you leave the pavilion, the silence follows like a trusted companion. Each step back along the corridor echoes softly, blending with the steady breath of the sleeping Empress and the eternal murmur of the Forbidden City, a reminder that even in the heart of power, the night belongs to those who keep it. The moon has slipped lower, a pale coin caught between the tiled rooftops as you wander deeper into the quiet palace. The air holds a cool edge now, a promise of dawn somewhere beyond the walls. Your steps follow a faint sound of water until you reach a secluded courtyard where a narrow stream glides beneath a stone bridge. The surface glitters with moonlight, broken only by drifting petals of late plum blossoms, tiny constellations afloat on silver. A single lantern sways from the bridge, its soft glow painting the water in honey and bronze. Beside it stands an elderly gardener, his robe the color of worn jade. He leans on a wooden rake, gazing into the current as though reading a secret script. When he notices you, He inclines his head, the motion slow and deliberate, as if bowing to the night itself. Without a word, he stirs the stream with the rake's handle. The water answers in gentle ripples, and the scent of wet stone rises, cool, earthy, grounding. He begins to hum a melody older than the palace, a tune that seems to know every pebble beneath the surface. Scholars might call it a folk song of the southern provinces, though some would argue it's simply the sound of memory given breath. From a small basket at his side, he lifts a handful of fresh mint and scatters it into the current. The leaves spin and drift, releasing a sharp green fragrance that mingles with the faint sweetness of plum. "Keeps the water awake," he murmurs, voice rough but kind. Perhaps it's an old superstition, or perhaps it's merely habit. Either way, the stream seems to brighten, as if agreeing. A night heron steps from the reeds, its white feathers catching the lantern light. It tilts its head toward the gardener, then toward you, as though acknowledging a fellow traveler. For a heartbeat, the courtyard feels like the center of a story no historian will ever capture. The gardener resumes his slow humming, tapping the rake gently against the stones to keep time. Each note settles into the cool air like a bead of dew. You find your breathing sinking to the rhythm, your thoughts softening with every passing moment. The palace behind you might as well be a dream. Here only water and song exist. A faint breeze carries the smell of pine from the distant hills, mingling with mint and moonlight. The heron lifts its wings and glides across the stream, silent as a falling petal. Its reflection stretches across the ripples before fading back into starlit silver. The gardener finally rests his rake and bows once more, this time toward the east, where the sky hints at the palest gray. "Dawn remembers us," he says softly, though whether it's meant for you or the river you cannot tell. His eyes close as if sealing the thought inside. You linger a while longer, letting the quiet seep into your bones. The water murmurs a language beyond translation, carrying mint leaves and stray blossoms toward some hidden exit in the palace wall. It feels like a promise that even in the heart of empire, small rituals of care endure unnoticed but unbroken. When you turn to leave, the gardener remains a still silhouette by the stream, the lantern casting his shadow long across the bridge. Behind you, the heron calls once, a sound both farewell and blessing. You step back into the corridor, the fragrance of mint following like a gentle ghost, and the forbidden city exhales another measure of its endless night. The scent of mint lingers on your sleeves as you make your way toward the inner cloisters, where the air feels even cooler and the stones beneath your sandals hold the night's breath. The corridor bends and opens into a courtyard paved with jade-colored bricks, each one polished smooth by centuries of quiet footsteps. Above, the sky is fading from black to a deep velvet blue, a subtle prelude to dawn. At the center of the courtyard stands a tall bronze clepsydra, a water clock, its surface etched with dragons that glimmer faintly in the dying moonlight. A slow drip of water marks the hours, each drop falling into a resonant bowl below. The sound is steady, hypnotic, a heartbeat for the sleeping palace. Historians debate the precision of such clocks, but here and now it feels more exact than any modern instrument. Two young attendants approach the clepsydra with small copper ladles. They move like reflections of each other, measuring the water's level and noting the time on slender bamboo slips. Their whispers are barely audible, blending with the soft plink of falling droplets. You catch a phrase, "The Empress still dreams," and it settles like a secret into the courtyard's hush. Near the base of the clock, a row of carved stone benches lines the wall. An elderly eunuch sits there, his posture straight despite the late hour. He holds a narrow scroll but doesn't read it. Instead, he listens to the water's rhythm, eyes half closed. Perhaps he measures the night not by words, but by the quiet music of time itself. A faint breeze stirs the silk banners hanging from the colonnade. They flutter with a sound like distant rain, releasing a subtle fragrance of old cedar and camphor. The moon has sunk low enough that the first grey blush of morning touches the eaves, a promise that the long night will soon surrender to day. One attendant finishes recording the hour and bows toward the eunuch. He responds with a single nod, his gaze lifting toward the paling sky. The third watch ends, he murmurs, his voice as soft as the drip of the clepsydra. The city stirs beneath its dreams. His companion smiles faintly, adding, "And yet here the dreams linger longest. You feel that truth in your bones." The courtyard holds an intimacy that defies the vastness of the palace, a sense that every drop of water carries the memory of countless nights like this one. Each ripple is both present and ancient, a reminder that time flows but never really departs. The attendants begin to pack their tools, careful not to disturb the measured cadence of the clock. The eunuch folds his scroll and rises, his robe whispering against the stone. They bow to the clepsydra, a quiet salute to the faithful keeper of hours, and move toward the exit without hurry. As you follow, you glance back once more. A final drop falls, sending a soft ring through the still air. The water shivers, then settles, mirroring the faint light now edging the horizon. For a moment you imagine the Empress stirring in her chamber, her breath aligned with the clock's gentle rhythm, a private harmony of ruler and realm. The corridor beyond is bathed in the earliest blue of morning. Somewhere a watchman strikes a gong, the sound folding into the slow drip you still hear in memory. You carry the echo with you, a quiet heartbeat of time as the Forbidden City prepares to trade its secrets of night for the golden certainty of dawn. The courtyard's cool hush trails after you like a loyal companion as you step into a long gallery leading toward the eastern walls. Here the air carries a faint warmth, an early hint that sunrise is gathering just beyond the city gates. The stone floor beneath your feet is slick with dew, each footprint leaving a soft, dark shimmer in the half-light. A low archway opens onto a covered veranda where the palace roof lines descend in graceful layers. From this vantage you can see the first streaks of pale rose stretching across the horizon. Lanterns gutter and fade, their glow paling before the oncoming day. The transformation is so slow you almost forget to breathe. A pair of palace musicians sit cross-legged near a railing, their instruments poised like sleeping birds. One plucks a guqin, coaxing the faintest whisper from its silk strings. The other holds a jiao flute, its bamboo polished smooth by years of use. They are here not to entertain, but to guide the palace from night to dawn with sound as gentle as breath. Historians still debate whether these twilight serenades were official duty or quiet devotion. To you, the answer feels irrelevant. The music simply exists, a bridge between darkness and light. The first notes drift outward, a melody that curls around the eaves and slides into the courtyard below. It mingles with the faint aroma of tea rising from the kitchens and the distant clink of gates unlocking. The tune is slow, minor, almost meditative, like a river negotiating stones it has known for centuries. Above the veranda, swallows begin their morning dance. They dart and wheel in the lightening sky, their wings catching the dawn's first silver. One swoops close enough that you hear the flick of air, a soft punctuation to the music. The musicians do not pause. They only tilt their heads slightly, as if the birds are welcome partners in their quiet duet. Across the courtyard, a small door opens. A young attendant appears carrying a shallow tray of steaming tea. She moves without hurry, each step measured, the porcelain cups barely clinking against the lacquered wood. She bows to the musicians before setting the tray near the railing, the steam mingling with the cool morning air to form little clouds that vanish as quickly as they appear. You take in the scent, roasted oolong with a hint of chrysanthemum, its warmth a gentle contrast to the night's fading chill. The guqin player glances toward the horizon and lets a final chord hang in the air. Long enough for the new light to settle on the polished strings. Somewhere behind you, the temple bell sounds a low, resonant note. Its echo rolls across the palace rooftops, and into the awakening city beyond. The musicians share a small smile, a silent acknowledgement that their work is nearly complete. The flute's last phrase lingers like a question, then dissolves into the hush of morning. A soft rustle signals the arrival of the senior attendant you saw in the garden. She carries a folded banner embroidered with the imperial emblem, ready to be raised at first light. She nods briefly to the musicians, then to you, her eyes bright with the calm certainty of someone who has watched countless dawns unfold. As the sky shifts from rose to gold, the first sunbeam strikes the highest roof tile, setting it alight like a spark of amber. The musicians lower their instruments, the attendant unfurls the banner, and a new day breathes into the forbidden city. The night has given up its secrets, but its echo remains in the hush of the veranda, the music, the tea, the silent grace of those who keep vigil while the world turns. You linger a moment longer, feeling the warmth of the rising sun brush your face. The Empress still sleeps in her chamber, the lavender sachet guarding her dreams, yet the palace stirs around her, alive with rituals that outlast the turning of dynasties. In this quiet hour between shadow and light, you sense that you too have become part of the timeless rhythm, a witness to the gentle pulse of history as it slips seamlessly into day. The first rays of sunlight glide across the tiled rooftops as you descend a narrow staircase toward the inner kitchens. The scent of roasting barley and fresh ginger greets you before you reach the bottom step, warm and comforting after the long, cool night. A faint clatter of porcelain mingles with the soft hiss of steam, the palace's heartbeat quickening in preparation for morning. Inside the kitchen courtyard, cooks move with a quiet efficiency born of repetition. Copper kettles gleam in the new light, their surfaces dappled by rising clouds of fragrant vapor. A young apprentice fans a charcoal brazier, while another grinds spices in a stone mortar. Cinnamon, star anise, a whisper of Sichuan pepper. The aroma swirls around you like a gentle invitation to wakefulness. At the far end of the courtyard, an older cook ladles a pale broth into a shallow bowl. He sprinkles a pinch of dried chrysanthemum and sets the bowl beside a lacquered tray already laden with delicate dishes, steamed rice cakes, thin slices of pear, and a small pot of honey. This is the Empress's dawn meal, crafted to balance energy and elegance. Historians still debate which recipes belong to imperial tradition and which to personal preference, but here the distinction feels unnecessary. Each bite is a quiet promise of care. A pair of eunuchs waits nearby, their hands folded, eyes lowered. When the tray is ready, they lift it in perfect unison and begin the slow procession toward the Empress's chamber. Their footsteps are soundless on the polished stones, a dance of discipline and devotion. You follow at a respectful distance, breathing in the warm trail of spices and steamed grain. The corridors are brighter now, the lanterns dim against the encroaching daylight. Shafts of gold filter through carved screens, casting latticed patterns that ripple across the floor as the eunuchs pass. Somewhere outside, sparrows call to each other in quick, cheerful notes, a lively counterpoint to the measured silence of the palace interior. When you reach the antechamber, the senior attendant is already waiting. She opens the inner screen just enough to admit the morning light and motions for the tray to be placed on a low table beside the bed. Through the parted curtains you glimpse the Empress stirring, her silhouette graceful even in drowsiness. The lavender sachet still rests near her pillow, its scent mingling with the warm fragrance of ginger and honey. One attendant kneels to pour hot water into a porcelain basin, while another gently adjusts the silk quilt. The Empress opens her eyes slowly, a faint smile touching her lips as she inhales the morning aromas. She speaks a few soft words, perhaps a greeting, perhaps a request for the day's first tea. The attendants nod and move with practiced ease, as if every gesture has been rehearsed across countless dawns. You catch the sound of a distant gong announcing the city's first hour of activity. Merchants outside the walls will soon be setting up their stalls. Farmers will begin the long walk toward the markets. Yet here, inside the Forbidden City, time unfolds with unhurried grace. The Empress accepts a cup of warm chrysanthemum broth and takes a slow sip, her gaze resting briefly on the pale sky beyond the moon window. For a heartbeat, the world holds still, steam curling from the cup, sunlight catching on embroidered cranes, the quiet murmur of attendants preparing her morning garments. You realize that this simple meal, this gentle ritual, is as much a part of imperial power as any grand audience or royal decree. It is the start of another day in which serenity itself becomes a form of rule. The senior attendant offers a final bow, signaling that the night's vigil has ended and the day's rhythm has begun. You step back, letting the fragrance of ginger and honey envelop you one last time. In the hush that follows, the palace feels both eternal and newly alive, as if every sunrise renews its ancient heartbeat. Outside, the sparrows' calls grow brighter. The Forbidden City exhales a long, slow breath, welcoming the sun and carrying the Empress and you into the gentle certainty of morning. The palace awakens with a hush that is somehow louder than silence. From the inner kitchens to the highest eaves, every beam and stone seems to stretch beneath the first true light of day. You linger near a carved wooden screen as the morning expands, the fragrance of chrysanthemum tea and sandalwood mingling in a soft swirl. The Empress now sits upright, her posture straight yet unhurried, wrapped in a robe the color of morning mist. Her hair attendants move around her like quiet constellations, each carrying small lacquered boxes filled with combs, pins, and fragrant oils. One pours a trickle of warm water over a jade comb to smooth its touch. Another opens a pouch of ground camellia petals, whose faint floral scent drifts across the room. They begin the hair ritual, slow, deliberate, a choreography perfected over centuries. The jade comb slides through her long black hair, with the sound of silk gliding across silk. Each stroke gleams in the sunlight that now filters through the lattice windows. A maid adds a drop of camellia oil, massaging it gently into each section until the strands shimmer like a river at dawn. Historians debate the hidden meanings of these morning adornments, symbols of power, of purity, or perhaps quiet acts of personal expression. Here they feel simply timeless. A tray of hair ornaments awaits, golden phoenix pins, pearl-tipped combs, and a delicate silver filigree shaped like a lotus just opening to the sun. The chief attendant lifts each piece in turn, letting the Empress choose with a glance. She selects a single phoenix pin, its tiny wings etched with patterns no bigger than a grain of rice. When set in place, it catches a ray of sunlight and scatters it across the silk screens in a burst of miniature stars. Outside, the steady rhythm of palace life grows more distinct. Courtiers shuffle to their early duties, and a distant bell signals the first council meeting of the day. Yet within these walls the atmosphere remains unhurried, as if the Empress's chamber exists in a slower, more gracious time. The Empress accepts a second cup of tea, the porcelain warm between her hands. She lifts it to her lips, eyes half-lidded, savoring the gentle bitterness that balances the morning's sweetness. The senior attendant murmurs the day's schedule, an audience with scholars, a quiet walk through the peony gardens, perhaps a visit to the library of rare scrolls if the weather holds. The Empress listens without comment, her gaze resting briefly on the sunlight dappling the polished floor. A soft breeze carries the scent of plum blossoms from the outer courtyards, mingling with the floral oils in the room. The effect is almost hypnotic. You feel your own breath slowing to match the rhythm of the attendants' careful movements, as though you too are part of the ritual. One maid kneels to present a small bronze mirror. Its surface reflects not only the Empress, but also the pale morning sky, a meeting of earth and heavens in a single circle of light. The Empress studies it for a quiet moment, then gives a faint nod. The attendants bow, their work complete. The Empress rises, the movement fluid as flowing ink. The embroidered cranes on her robe seem to stir in the shifting light. She steps toward the balcony, where the first true warmth of the sun spills across the tiles. From this height, the Forbidden City stretches in a golden sea of roofs and shadowed courtyards, a realm that will soon buzz with ministers, messengers, and music. You remain in the hush of the chamber, breathing in the mingled scents of tea, camellia, and early plum. It strikes you that the power of the empire begins not with drums or decrees, but with these quiet gestures. A careful combing of hair, a shared cup of tea, a deliberate pause before the day begins. The Empress stands in sunlight, her silhouette serene and commanding, yet softened by the morning's gentle glow. Behind her, the jade comb and phoenix pin glint like captured dawn. In this moment, the night's secrets, the garden's whispers, and the city's awakening all converge, reminding you that history is often written not in battles or proclamations, but in the patient rituals of everyday grace. The morning light now spills fully across the Forbidden City, brushing every roof tile with gold. You follow at a respectful distance, as the Empress steps onto the high terrace that overlooks the vast southern courtyards. From here the view unfurls like an endless scroll, layers of red walls and emerald roofs stretching toward the haze of Beijing's waking streets. The city beyond stirs with muted clatter, vendors opening stalls, the faint clop of hooves, but within these walls the sound arrives softened, as if wrapped in silk. A gentle breeze carries the fragrance of plum and cedar. The Empress pauses, drawing a slow breath, her robe of misty grey and pale silver catching the light so that embroidered cranes seem to lift from the fabric. Around her, attendants stand a discreet distance away, their faces lowered, their presence quiet as shadows. One holds a slim parasol of pale silk, ready but unneeded, for the early sun is still tender. Below, the palace guards change shifts. The clink of armor and the muted thud of measured footsteps rise in a slow rhythm, a subtle drumbeat beneath the hush of the morning. The Empress watches without a word. Perhaps she counts the movements as others count heartbeats. Perhaps she simply listens, attuned to the way the Empire greets a new day. Beside her, the senior attendant offers a scroll, today's first memorial from the court scholars. The Empress accepts it without haste, eyes scanning the brushstrokes. You glimpse the elegant sweep of characters, but cannot read their meaning. A slight smile flickers across her face, gone as quickly as dew in sunlight. Historians would later argue whether these morning readings shaped policy or served as quiet contemplation. Standing here, you suspect both are true. The musicians you heard earlier strike a final chord from the veranda below, a soft echo to herald the full arrival of day. Their notes mingle with the cry of distant market hawkers and the sudden trill of swallows darting across the blue. For a moment, the sounds form a single seamless chorus, palace and city, past and present, breathing together. The Empress lowers the scroll and turns slightly, the sun catching the phoenix pin in her hair. Tiny reflections scatter across the terrace tiles, like sparks from a hidden forge. She lifts her gaze to the horizon where pale clouds drift, their edges tinged with rose and gold. In her expression you sense a quiet certainty, the composure of someone who has lived through countless dawns and knows the rhythm of power is measured not in proclamations but in poise. An attendant kneels to offer a final cup of tea, this one infused with jasmine. Steam coils upward, carrying a sweetness that mingles with the cool morning air. The Empress accepts, sips once, and lets the cup rest in her hands. The gesture is simple, yet it carries the weight of a kingdom waking beneath her watch. Around you the palace breathes. Courtiers begin their day's duties, distant bells mark the hour, and the last traces of night retreat into memory. You feel the long arc of history settle like a soft cloak across your shoulders. The midnight rituals, the moonlit gardens, the music at the edge of dawn, all now part of the same golden morning. The Empress stands a while longer, then turns to leave the terrace. Her attendants follow in quiet harmony, silk slippers whispering against the stone. You linger behind, letting the warmth of the sun soak through your sleeves, letting the city's gentle awakening seep into your own breath. As the echo of her footsteps fades, the Forbidden City seems to sigh, a contented exhale after a night of secrets. The cranes embroidered on the departing robe, the scent of jasmine tea, the soft gleam of jade and gold, these remain in the air like the last notes of a lullaby. You realize that the story has come full circle. From the hidden hours of darkness to the luminous certainty of day, the Empress's world has unfolded in quiet majesty. The breeze grows softer, carrying the final whispers of the night's rituals. Your eyes follow the drifting plum petals across the terrace until they vanish into the morning light. Slowly, you let the hush of the palace guide your own breathing, long even, unhurried, until the present moment feels as timeless as the empire itself. The roofs glow brighter, the city hums awake, yet you remain wrapped in the stillness that the night has left behind. Your thoughts drift like the last wisp of cedar smoke, dissolving into the endless blue above. The story closes not with a proclamation, but with a sigh. A gentle assurance that serenity endures long after the world resumes its busy march. End of script. Sweet dreams.